Commander ZYXTAL of the Galactic High Council stood before the massive assembly hall, his forearms spread wide as thousands of species listened in respectful silence. The crystalline structures of the council chambers reflected the light from 100 different suns, each representing a world that had joined the peaceful coalition spanning 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Today marks the end of our patience, ZYXTAL announced, his voice carrying through translation devices to reach every delegate present. The species calling itself humanity has refused our generous offer of integration for the final time. A ripple of approval moved through the crowd. The Valkyrie delegation clicked their mandibles in agreement, while the gaseous Nethare pulsed with supportive colors. Even the normally peaceful Sylvan had supported this decision after reviewing humanity's response to their diplomatic overtures. Their behavior is unprecedented, continued the commander, pulling up a holographic display showing Earth and its surrounding systems. When we offered them our advanced medical technology, they laughed and said they preferred their duct tape and determination approach. When we shared our efficient agricultural methods, they chuckled and mentioned something about making do with what they had. Most insulting of all, when we offered to upgrade their primitive faster-than-light travel, they actually giggled and patted our ambassador on what they called the head equivalent. The assembly erupted in outraged chatter. The Mordecai representative, a towering insectoid creature, stood up. Such disrespect cannot be tolerated. We have brought peace and prosperity to 10,000 worlds. Indeed, ZYXTAL nodded gravely. Every species we've contacted has gratefully accepted our guidance. The humans are the first to not only refuse, but to treat our generosity as some form of entertainment. Their ambassador actually said, and I quote from the translation, "Thanks, but we're good. We kind of like figuring things out the hard way." The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy, manifested their disapproval as crackling lightning between their forms. This cannot stand. Order must be maintained. The decision is unanimous then, ZYXTAL declared. We will demonstrate to humanity what happens when you reject the benevolence of the galaxy. Our combined fleets will show them that their primitive weapons and amateur tactics are no match for our advanced civilization. As the council dispersed, each species eager to contribute their most advanced warships to the cause, none of them noticed the small human observation probe that had been recording everything from its position disguised as space debris near the station. Back on Earth, in a cramped military bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the transmission with her senior staff. The room was a stark contrast to the gleaming alien council chambers, concrete walls covered with old maps, coffee-stained papers scattered across metal desks, and the persistent hum of outdated air conditioning. Well, that's just fantastic, muttered General Rodriguez, taking a swig from his 20th cup of coffee that day. They're mad because we told them thanks, but no thanks to their help. Apparently, refusing charity is considered an act of war in their book, Admiral Chen replied, studying the tactical readouts. What's our fleet status, Commander Park? Commander Park, a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, consulted her tablet. We've got roughly 300 ships that could charitably be called combat-ready. Half of them are held together with literal prayer and improvisation. The newest vessel in our fleet is still running on technology that these aliens probably considered obsolete 1,000 years ago. Weapons? Asked the Admiral. Nuclear missiles, kinetic projectiles, and a few experimental energy weapons that work about 60% of the time, Park replied. Oh, and Private Johnson in engineering swears he's figured out how to turn a microwave into some kind of directed energy weapon, though medical doesn't recommend testing it. The room fell silent except for the constant humming and occasional sparking from the ancient equipment keeping their base operational. On paper, humanity was about to face the combined might of thousands of advanced civilizations with technology that would make their ancestors proud, if those ancestors happened to be from the early space age. General Rodriguez broke the silence. So let me get this straight. We're about to fight the entire galaxy with ships held together by duct tape, weapons that sometimes work, and absolutely no idea what we're actually doing. Admiral Chen looked around the room at her staff. These weren't the clean, efficient officers you might see in recruitment videos. These were tired, overworked people who had spent years making impossible things work through sheer stubbornness and creative problem-solving. Lieutenant Morrison had a calculator taped to his wrist because the base computers kept crashing. Major Williams was taking notes with a pen that she had to bang against the desk every few sentences to get working.
Pretty much, the Admiral confirmed.
Outstanding, Rodriguez grinned, and the entire room erupted in laughter. It wasn't the laughter of people who had lost their minds, though an outside observer might have thought so. It was the laughter of a species that had climbed out of caves with nothing but curiosity and stubbornness, had split atoms before they had computers, had reached the moon with less processing power than a modern toaster, and had somehow managed to spread across multiple star systems despite technology that most advanced civilizations would consider historical artifacts.
All right, people, Admiral Chen said once the laughter died down.
Let's show them exactly why you should never pick a fight with someone who considers making do with what you have a point of pride. The preparation began immediately, though calling it preparation might have been generous. It was more like organized chaos with a military flavor. Engineers began welding additional armor plating onto ships using whatever materials they could find. The UES Determination had park benches welded to its hull because the quartermaster had run out of proper metal sheets. The UES Stubborn had fishing nets installed as makeshift anti-projectile barriers because someone remembered reading that sometimes the simplest solutions worked best.
Dr.
Elizabeth Hayes, humanity's leading expert in alien technology, which meant she had studied their transmissions for 3 whole months, stood before a whiteboard covered in equations that looked like they had been written by someone having a math-related breakdown. Okay, so here's what we know about their technology, she announced to a room full of military personnel who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Their ships are incredibly advanced, with perfect energy distribution, flawless structural integrity, and weapons that operate at theoretical maximum efficiency.
That sounds bad, someone from the back called out.
Oh, it gets worse, Dr. Hayes continued cheerfully. Their tactics are based on thousands of years of successfully integrating peaceful civilizations.
They're used to overwhelming displays of force that convince their opponents to surrender immediately.
So we're doomed? Asked Lieutenant Morrison, whose calculator wrist strap had started smoking slightly. Actually, Dr. Hayes grinned, I think we might be the first species they've encountered that's too stupid to realize we're supposed to be scared.
More laughter filled the room. It was becoming a theme. As the alien fleets began moving toward human space, their progress was tracked by a network of human observation posts that couldn't accurately be called sophisticated.
Most were automated sensors duct taped to asteroids, with communication arrays that worked on a good enough basis. The first reports were sobering.
The alien fleet wasn't just large, it was incomprehensibly vast. Thousands of ships representing hundreds of species, each vessel a masterwork of engineering that had taken decades to perfect. Their formations were flawless, their coordination absolute, their technology beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of achieving. In response, humanity began loading their ships with everything they could find. Medical supplies went next to ammunition, spare parts were stored beside emergency rations, and more than one vessel ended up carrying someone's pet because there hadn't been time to arrange proper care. The UES Improvisation, humanity's flagship, was a perfect example of human military doctrine.
Originally designed as a colony ship, it had been converted to military use by welding gun turrets to its farming modules and turning the hydroponics bay into a weapons factory. The bridge was located in what used to be the ship's cafeteria, and the captain's chair was literally a repurposed office chair with extra seatbelts welded on. Captain Maria Santos stood on her cafeteria bridge, looking out at the approaching alien fleet through windows that had been reinforced with whatever clear materials the engineering team could find. Parts of the view were slightly distorted because one section was made from aquarium glass.
Distance to enemy fleet, she asked.
About 6 hours at current approach speed, replied her sensor officer, who was monitoring multiple screens that clearly came from different manufacturers and time periods. They're maintaining perfect formation and broadcasting what our computers think might be surrender demands, though the translation software keeps crashing.
Weapon status? All missiles loaded and ready.
The kinetic launchers are operational, though engineering wants me to mention that we shouldn't fire them all at once because it might shake the ship apart. Oh, and the experimental laser cannon is ready for testing, but Dr. Peterson wants everyone to know that he's not entirely sure it won't accidentally open a small black hole.
Captain Santos nodded as if this was perfectly normal information to receive before a battle. Communications, can you reach the rest of the fleet?
Yes, ma'am, though we're using a mixture of radio, laser communication, and what Chief Engineer Murphy insists on calling really bright flashlights.
It's not pretty, but it works. Outstanding.
Send a message to all ships. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight.
We're trying to survive an unfair one. Use everything we've got, and, when that runs out, use everything we can improvise.
And, remind everyone that we're representing our entire species here, so let's make sure we give them something to remember.
The message was transmitted across the human fleet using their improvised communication network.
On dozens of ships, crews that look more like mechanics and inventors than soldiers prepared for a battle they had no business fighting. And, in the depths of space, the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever assembled continued its approach, confident that this would be the shortest war in galactic history. The first shots of what would later be called the Laughing War were fired exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes after first contact, though calling them shots might have been generous. The alien fleet, led by the magnificent Valkyrie dreadnought Eternal Harmony, opened fire with weapons that could theoretically crack planets. The humans responded by launching everything they had. Commander ZYX Tal watched from his command center as the primitive human missiles approached his fleet. His tactical displays showed perfect intercept solutions, optimal defensive positioning, and predicted a complete human defeat within the next 4 minutes. Sir, his weapons officer reported, the human projectiles are unusual.
Explain. Well, they appear to be nuclear missiles, kinetic projectiles, and what our sensors identify as household appliances. ZYX Tal's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display.
Sure enough, mixed in with the crude but functional missiles were objects that defied military logic. His ship's advanced scanners were identifying washing machines, refrigerators, and something that registered as a particularly large microwave oven, all traveling at significant velocity toward his fleet.
Are they trying to confuse our targeting systems? He wondered aloud. Unknown, sir.
Our computers are having difficulty categorizing threats because they keep detecting kitchen equipment. The first wave of human attacks reached the alien fleet, and the results were exactly what everyone had expected. The nuclear missiles were intercepted by energy shields, the kinetic projectiles were deflected by defensive fields, and the household appliances were simply ignored.
Until they exploded.
The washing machine, it turned out, had been packed with every explosive the UES determination could spare, along with several thousand ball bearings and what Chief Engineer Murphy had described as some stuff that goes boom real good. When it detonated against the shields of an FRA cruiser, it didn't do any serious damage, but it did create a spectacular light show that temporarily blinded their sensors. The microwave oven had been modified by Private Johnson into what he optimistically called a directed electromagnetic pulse device. When it was shot down by defensive fire, it released a burst of electromagnetic energy that scrambled the communication systems of 3 nearby vessels for almost 30 seconds. The refrigerator was just a refrigerator, but someone had painted "Humanity Says Hello" on the side in letters large enough to be visible from a considerable distance. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet.
Put it through.
The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what was clearly a repurposed cafeteria. A human female in a uniform that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts sat in a chair that creaked audibly whenever she moved. "This is Captain Maria Santos of the United Earthship Improvisation," she said with a smile that Commander ZYX Tal found deeply unsettling.
"We just wanted to thank you for giving us the chance to field test our new household appliance delivery system. Initial results look promising."
"Your attacks were completely ineffective," ZYX Tal replied, trying to maintain his dignity despite the fact that 3 of his ships were still trying to restore their communication systems after being confused by a flying kitchen appliance.
"Oh, we know," Captain Santos nodded cheerfully. "Those weren't actually attacks. Those were just us saying hello. We figured you might want to see what you're up against before this gets serious."
The communication cut out, leaving ZYX Tal staring at a blank screen. In all his years of military service, no one had ever used household appliances as a form of greeting.
"Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human ships are moving into I'm not sure what to call it. It's not any formation in our databases. Looking at the tactical display, ZYX Tal could see what his officer meant. The human ships were scattered across space in what appeared to be a completely random pattern. There was no tactical logic to their positioning, no clear strategy, no adherence to any known military doctrine. Are they retreating? He asked. No, sir. If anything, they're getting closer. But they're approaching from 17 different vectors simultaneously, and several of their ships appear to be flying backwards. This was true. The UES Stubborn was indeed flying backwards, not out of any tactical consideration, but because their main engines had failed and Chief Engineer Collins had managed to rig the maneuvering thrusters to provide forward thrust by pointing the ship the wrong way around. Their largest vessel is. The tactical officer paused, checking his readings again. Sir, their flagship appears to be broadcasting music. This was also true. Captain Santos had decided that if they were going to make history, they might as well do it with style. The UES Improvisation was now broadcasting a selection of human music across all frequencies, including what Earth archivists called classic rock and what the aliens' translation computers were struggling to categorize as either a war cry or some form of cultural expression. The song currently playing was Don't Stop Me Now by Queen, and the alien fleet was getting a real-time education in human optimism. Should we respond to their musical transmission, sir? Commander ZYX Tal was beginning to suspect that humanity was either the most sophisticated military force he'd ever encountered, or the most confused. Begin the attack. Full power to all weapons. Let's end this quickly. The alien fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams that could melt asteroids, plasma cannons that operated at temperatures comparable to star cores, and gravitational weapons that could twist space itself into knots lanced out toward the scattered human ships. And the humans did something that would be studied in military academies for the next 1,000 years. They split up. Not in any organized fashion, not according to any tactical manual, but like a flock of birds suddenly realizing they were being chased by a predator. Every ship went in a different direction at maximum acceleration, turning the battlefield into absolute chaos. The UES Determination dove down relative to the galactic plane and began spinning like a corkscrew while continuing to fire missiles in random directions. The UES Stubborn, still flying backwards, began an evasive maneuver that their pilot described as the washing machine cycle, which involved rapid rotation around all three axes while changing direction every few seconds. The UES Improvisation, meanwhile, was flying directly toward the alien flagship while broadcasting increasingly energetic music and occasionally launching what appeared to be garbage. Sir, the weapons officer reported, we can't maintain target locks. Their movements are completely unpredictable. This was the unintended genius of humanity's complete lack of proper military training. Every other species in the galaxy had developed sophisticated, logical approaches to space combat based on mathematics, physics, and thousands of years of tactical evolution. Their movements were efficient, predictable, and elegant. Human pilots, on the other hand, were flying by instinct, panic, and whatever seemed like a good idea at the moment. The result was flight patterns that no computer could predict because they weren't based on any rational system. Target their flagship, ZYX Tal ordered. Concentrate all firepower on the vessel broadcasting that noise. The combined firepower of a dozen alien ships focused on the UES Improvisation, energy beams converging on Captain Santos' converted cafeteria bridge. For a moment, it seemed like the humans' luck had run out. Then, the ship vanished. Not destroyed, not teleported, just gone. Where did it go? ZYX Tal demanded. Scanning now, sir. I'm detecting, sir, they appear to have flown inside the asteroid field at grid reference 77 Alpha. Inside an asteroid field? That's suicide. Yes, sir. No ship could navigate that safely. The gravitational interactions alone would tear apart anything larger than a small fighter. What the aliens didn't understand was that human pilots had been flying through dangerous spaces for as long as they'd been flying. Earth's solar system was full of debris, magnetic anomalies, and gravitational chaos that made it a terrible place to learn to fly. As a result, human pilots were very good at flying through terrible places.
The UES improvisation was currently threading its way between asteroids the size of buildings, using the space rocks as cover while Captain Santos calmly sipped coffee and listened to her engineering team report on which systems were currently on fire. "Engines are running hot but stable," Chief Engineer Martinez called out over the intercom. "Hull integrity is at about 70%, which is better than last Tuesday. Oh, and the experimental laser cannon is ready to fire, but Dr. Peterson wants me to remind you that we still don't know what it's going to do." "Outstanding," Captain Santos replied. "Target their flagship and let's see what happens." The experimental laser cannon, which had been built by combining parts from 17 different projects and powered by what Dr. Peterson described as aggressive optimism, fired its first shot. The beam was supposed to be a focused energy weapon capable of penetrating advanced alien armor. What actually emerged from the cannon was something that looked more like controlled lightning having an argument with a rainbow. It twisted through space in a pattern that hurt to look at directly, changed colors several times, and made a sound that the ship's computers couldn't classify. When it struck the Valkyrie dreadnought Eternal Harmony, it didn't penetrate the shields. Instead, it seemed to confuse them. The entire ship flickered like a light bulb with a loose connection, and, for exactly 4.7 seconds, all of its systems displayed error messages in what appeared to be ancient Valkyrie poetry. "Sir," the alien weapons officer reported, "they hit us with some kind of... I don't know what that was. Our shields are intact, but our computers think they're having an existential crisis." The human attack had accomplished exactly nothing in terms of actual damage, but the psychological effect was considerable. The most advanced military force in the galaxy was being shot at with weapons that shouldn't work, by people who shouldn't exist, using tactics that couldn't possibly succeed. And, somehow, the humans were still fighting. Captain Santos watched the alien fleet through her aquarium glass windows as her ship continued its asteroid dance. The enemy vessels were magnificent examples of engineering perfection, sleek and powerful and completely logical. They were also starting to look frustrated, if such a thing were possible for spaceships. "Communications," she called out, "can you patch me through to the rest of our fleet?" "Yes ma'am, though I should mention that the UES Stubborn is currently using Morse code because their radio got hit by something, and the UES Determination appears to be communicating through interpretive dance." "That works. Send to all ships, Phase 2 is go. Time to see if they've got a sense of humor." Across the human fleet, crews began implementing the second phase of their completely improvised battle plan. It was time to see exactly how the galaxy's most advanced civilizations would react to humanity's secret weapon. Pure, unhinged creativity. Phase 2 of humanity's battle plan began with what military historians would later describe as the most ridiculous 15 minutes in the history of galactic warfare. The UES Determination emerged from behind a particularly large asteroid towing what appeared to be a giant mirror made from welded-together emergency hull patches. The makeshift reflector was roughly the size of a football field and wobbled alarmingly as the ship maneuvered it into position. "Sir," the Valkyrie tactical officer reported, "one of their vessels is, sir, they appear to have constructed some form of primitive solar array." Commander ZYX-Tal studied the tactical display with growing confusion. "Are they trying to power their weapons with solar energy? That's impossibly inefficient. What the humans were actually doing was something far more chaotic." Chief Engineer Murphy had remembered reading about ancient Earth military tactics involving reflected sunlight, and had convinced Captain Rodriguez that they could use their improvised mirror to reflect the aliens' own energy weapons back at them. The physics were completely wrong, the engineering was questionable at best, and the chances of success were approximately zero. It worked perfectly. When the Nethara cruiser fired its main plasma cannon at the UES Determination, expecting to vaporize the primitive human vessel, the beam struck the wobbling mirror at exactly the right angle to bounce back toward the alien fleet. The reflected energy didn't hit anything important, but it did create a spectacular light show that temporarily blinded half the sensors in the alien formation. More importantly, it demonstrated something that no one in the galactic military hierarchy had ever considered: humans would try absolutely anything. "They're using our own weapons against us with a piece of reflective metal," ZYX-Tal said, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose worldview was being systematically dismantled. "Should we stop firing at them, sir?" "No.
Continue the attack. They can't possibly maintain that, whatever that is. This was technically correct.
The mirror lasted exactly 17 more seconds before the stress of maneuvering tore it apart, sending shiny fragments spinning through space like the world's most dangerous confetti.
But, those 17 seconds had been enough for the UES Stubborn to complete its own contribution to Phase 2.
Still flying backwards and communicating only through Morse code, the Stubborn had been using its unique orientation to deploy what Captain Williams optimistically called space mines. These weren't sophisticated explosive devices, they were garbage bags full of metal scraps, emergency flares, and anything else the crew could find that might cause problems for pursuing vessels. The bags had been ejected from the ship's waste disposal system and were now drifting through space like the most dangerous litter in galactic history. When the Mordecai destroyer pursued the retreating human ship through the debris field, its advanced sensors detected the garbage bags as potential threats and automatically engaged them with defensive fire. The result was a series of explosions that turned miscellaneous human junk into a cloud of high-velocity debris. The destroyer wasn't seriously damaged, but it was forced to retreat while its automated systems tried to determine why they were being attacked by what appeared to be someone's lunch containers and old clothes. Meanwhile, the UES Improvisation had emerged from the asteroid field and was approaching the alien flagship along a flight path that could only be described as enthusiastic zigzagging. Captain Santos was still broadcasting music, but had switched to something her cultural database listed as heavy metal, which the alien translation computers were interpreting as either a declaration of war or an invitation to a very loud party. "Sir," the alien communications officer reported, "the human flagship is transmitting again." "Put it through." Captain Santos appeared on the screen, looking remarkably cheerful for someone whose ship was currently being shot at by the combined firepower of 3 civilizations. Behind her, the bridge crew could be seen running around putting out small fires while someone in the background appeared to be welding something to a wall. "Commander ZYX Tal," she said with a warm smile, "we've been thinking about your offer to join the galactic community." "You're in the middle of a battle," ZYX Tal replied, bewildered. "This is hardly the time for diplomatic discussions." "Actually, we think it's the perfect time," Santos continued. "See, we've been wondering what we could possibly offer a galaxy full of advanced civilizations. You've got better technology, better ships, better everything really." "That's correct," ZYX Tal admitted, though he was beginning to suspect this was leading somewhere he wasn't going to like. "But we realized something," Santos grinned. "You don't have any idea how to have fun." The transmission showed the human captain gesturing to something off-screen. A moment later, what appeared to be a small asteroid drifted into view. It had been carved into the shape of a smiling face and was rotating slowly while trailing a banner that read "Have a nice day" in 17 different languages. "You carved an asteroid," ZYX Tal said flatly. "Oh, that's not the good part," Santos laughed. "The good part is what's inside it." The smiling asteroid exploded, not with the force of a weapon, but with the gentle pop of a party favor. Instead of deadly fragments, it released thousands of small objects that the alien sensors identified as flowers, confetti, and what appeared to be handwritten notes. The notes, when collected and translated, turned out to be personal messages from human civilians thanking the alien fleet for giving humanity something interesting to do on a Tuesday and inviting them to visit Earth anytime for coffee and conversation. "You're sending us thank you cards," ZYX Tal said, his voice rising to what his species considered a shout. "In the middle of a war." "Well, when you put it like that, it does sound a bit silly," Santos admitted. "But here's the thing, we've been having the most fun we've had in decades. When's the last time you got to solve problems you'd never seen before? When's the last time you had to build something from scratch because your fancy equipment broke down? When's the last time you had to laugh at how impossible your situation was just to keep going?" Around the alien fleet, something unprecedented was happening. Crew members were abandoning their posts to look out viewports at the ongoing battle. The sight of human ships held together with improvised repairs, flying in patterns that defied logic, and somehow continuing to fight against impossible odds was unlike anything they'd ever witnessed. On the ethereal collective vessel Serene Calculation, a being of pure energy found itself experiencing what could only be described as amusement for the first time in its 1,000-year existence. On the Sylvan cruiser Peaceful Harmony, the crew was placing bets on what the humans would try next, despite their species having evolved beyond gambling millions of years ago. Even the Mordecai, who prided themselves on perfect military discipline, were passing around what appeared to be snacks while watching the human ships dance between their weapons fire like some kind of aggressive ballet.
"Sir," the Valkyrie weapons officer called out, "should we continue firing?"
ZYXTAL looked at his tactical displays. The human fleet was down to about half strength, most of their remaining ships were heavily damaged, and they were completely outgunned.
By every logical measure, the battle should have been over 10 minutes ago.
Instead, the humans were still fighting, still improvising, still finding new ways to turn their disadvantages into something resembling an advantage. And, somehow, watching them refuse to give up was the most inspiring thing he'd seen in his entire military career.
"Sir," the weapons officer repeated.
"Hold fire," ZYXTAL ordered quietly.
"Sir?"
"I said hold fire," he called out more loudly.
"All ships, cease fire immediately." Across the alien fleet, weapons powered down as confused officers tried to understand why their commander was calling off an attack they were clearly winning. "Open a channel to the human flagship," ZYXTAL ordered.
Captain Santos appeared on the screen again, still smiling despite the fact that her ship was now trailing smoke from at least 3 different sections.
"Commander," she said cheerfully, "I hope we haven't kept you too long.
We know you're all very busy bringing peace and prosperity to the galaxy." "Captain Santos," ZYXTAL said slowly, "I have a question for you."
"Sure, shoot."
"Your species was offered the accumulated wisdom and technology of thousands of civilizations. You could have had paradise handed to you without effort. Why did you refuse?" Santos was quiet for a moment, and, when she spoke, her voice carried a seriousness that hadn't been there before.
"Because paradise that you don't earn isn't paradise," she said. "It's just a very comfortable cage."
"We're not afraid of struggling, Commander. We're not afraid of failing, or of building things that fall apart, or of trying again when they do.
That's not a bug in our programming, that's what makes us human."
She gestured to her improvised bridge, where her crew was still running around fixing things that shouldn't have been fixable.
"You want to know what we can offer the galaxy?
We can show you that it's okay to fail spectacularly, as long as you get up and try something even more spectacular next time.
We can show you that the best solutions usually come from the worst situations.
And we can show you that sometimes, when everything goes wrong, the only sensible thing to do is laugh and keep going anyway." The transmission ended, leaving ZYXTAL staring at a blank screen while around him, his crew waited for orders.
"Sir," his tactical officer finally asked.
"What are your orders?" ZYXTAL looked around his pristine command center, with its perfect displays and flawless systems and crew members who never made mistakes because they'd been trained never to take risks that might lead to mistakes.
"Stand down all weapons," he ordered. "And send a message to the Galactic Council."
"What should the message say, sir?"
ZYXTAL thought about Admiral Chen's question from earlier. When was the last time any of them had laughed at how impossible their situation was?
"Tell them," he said slowly, "that we've discovered something more valuable than compliance."
"What's that, sir?" "Inspiration." 3 months later, the first Galactic Exchange Program was established. Alien engineers worked alongside human mechanics to build ships that combined advanced technology with human ingenuity.
Alien scholars studied human literature to understand how a species could find humor in the most desperate situations. Alien commanders learned from human tacticians about the value of unpredictability and creative problem-solving. The humans, for their part, finally, got the advanced technology they'd been offered. But they insisted on taking it apart to understand how it worked, improving it in ways that weren't supposed to be possible, and occasionally using it for purposes that made alien safety inspectors very nervous. The galaxy discovered that having humans around was exhausting, frustrating, dangerous, and absolutely invaluable. Because sometimes, when you've spent millennia perfecting the art of doing things the right way, you need someone to remind you that the wrong way can be a lot more interesting. And, sometimes, when the universe declares war on you, the best response isn't to surrender or fight back. Sometimes, the best response is to laugh and show them something they've never seen before. The war that was supposed to last 4 minutes ended up lasting exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes. It was followed by the longest period of scientific advancement, cultural exchange, and general creative chaos in galactic history. Humanity had finally found their place in the galaxy. They were the species that refused to accept that anything was impossible, especially when everyone assured them it was. And the galaxy, despite itself, was grateful.